I never expected to walk in on this. Coming home from school, I thought I'd have the house to myself, but what I stumbled upon behind my stepmom's slightly open door left me speechless. Caught in a moment so intimate, so unexpected, my entire world shifted in an instant. What happened next changed everything between us, something neither of us could ever undo. Stay with me as I tell you how it all spiraled into a night I'll never forget. I had just gotten home from school, the weight of the day hanging off me like my heavy backpack. The house was quiet, unusually so, with only the soft hum of the refrigerator filling the space. The late afternoon sun cast long golden beams across the hardwood floor, and everything seemed peaceful, calm in a way that made me think I was completely alone. I tossed my bag onto the couch, planning to grab something to eat and relax for a bit before anyone else got home. As I made my way toward the kitchen, though, something caught my attention, a sound faint but unmistakable. I stopped, frozen in place, for a moment, unsure of what I was hearing. It was soft, almost like a low hum or a whisper, but it had a different quality to it, something intimate, personal. Curious, I listened more closely, trying to pinpoint where the sound was coming from. It wasn't loud, but there was something in it that made my skin tingle with uncertainty. Slowly, cautiously, I stepped down the hallway, my feet making no noise on the floor as I approached the source. The door to my stepmom's room was slightly ajar, just enough that I could see the edge of the bed and a sliver of the room beyond. I shouldn't have looked. I knew I shouldn't have, but something kept pulling me toward that door. Curiosity gnawing at me, I leaned closer, just a little, peeking through the crack in the door. That's when I saw her, my stepmom, lying on the bed, her back arched slightly, her eyes closed in what could only be described as sheer pleasure. For a second, I was too stunned to move. I stood there, frozen, my breath catching in my throat. As I watched her, my mind racing to process what I was seeing. She was touching herself, her fingers moving slowly, rhythmically, as soft moans escaped her lips. The sight of it sent a jolt through me, something deep and unfamiliar. I felt my pulse quicken, my heart thewing hard in my chest as a wave of heat washed over me. I knew I should leave, should back away quietly and pretend I'd never seen any of this, but I couldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, my eyes locked on her every little movement she made, sending a ripple through me. She was beautiful, so inedibly beautiful at that moment, her body moving with a grace that seemed effortless, natural. Then, just as I was about to turn away, she opened her eyes. I panicked for a second, thinking I'd been caught, but instead of reacting, she just looked at me, her gaze soft, almost inviting. There was no anger, no shock, just a slow, smoldering look that made my skin tingle and my breath hitch in my throat. "Come in," she said softly, her voice low and warm, and for a moment I thought I'd imagined it, but when I didn't move, she smiled, that same inviting smile, and said it again, more firmly this time, "Come in." My legs moved on their own, slowly carrying me into the room, my heart pounding harder with every step. I felt a strange mixture of fear and excitement swirling inside me, and when I finally stood by the bed looking down at her, I could feel the tension between us thick in the air. She didn't say anything at first, just kept watching me with those deep, smoldering eyes that seemed to see right through me. I swallowed hard, trying to form words, but nothing came out. My mouth felt dry and my thoughts were a jumbled mess. She didn't seem to mind. She just reached out, taking my hand gently Her touch soft but firm as she pulled me closer. My heart was racing now, and I could feel a knot of nervousness tightening in my stomach, but there was something else too, something that felt like excitement, anticipation as I sat down beside her on the edge of the bed she didn't let go of my hand. Instead, she guided it slowly down her body, over the soft curve of her hip, the warmth of her skin radiating through my fingertips. My breath caught as I felt her hand over mine, leading me with a slow, deliberate movement. I could feel her pulse beneath her skin, the subtle rise and fall of her chest as she breathed. "Don't be afraid," she whispered, her voice barely audible but filled with a kind of tenderness that made my heart ache. "Just relax," I nodded, though I wasn't sure if I was more nervous or excited. Her fingers intertwined with mine, guiding me, teaching me as we moved together in perfect unison. Every touch sent a jolt of electricity through me, and I could feel the connection between us deepening with every passing second. It wasn't just physical, it was something more, something intimate and real. The moments stretched on, the world outside fading away until there was nothing left but the two of us here in this room, sharing something that felt so forbidden and yet so right. Time seemed to slow, each breath, each touch lasting forever as the tension between us built to a breaking point. She pulled me closer, her body pressing against mine, and I could feel the heat of her skin, the warmth of her breath on my neck. Her lips brushed lightly against my ear as she whispered again, her voice soft and breathy. "Stay with me," she murmured, her tone filled with a quiet urgency that made my heart skip. "Don't go." I couldn't have left even if I'd wanted to. The pull between us was too strong, the connection too deep. We were locked at this moment, and nothing else mattered. I leaned in, my lips inches from hers, feeling the heat of her breath on my skin. Time seemed to stand still, the world holding its breath as we hovered on the edge of something neither of us could deny. The air between us was thick with anticipation, the kind of tension that sent a shiver down my spine. Then, just as I thought the moment would break, she leaned in, her lips brushing softly against mine, sending a shock wave of warmth through me. It was gentle at first, tentative, as if we were testing the waters, but then it deepened, her lips pressing more firmly against mine, her hand still guiding me, still showing me what she wanted, what we both wanted. The kiss was slow, tender, filled with a kind of passion that was both overwhelming and gentle. It felt like everything we'd been holding back was pouring out in that moment. Every touch, every breath, every heartbeat sinking together as we finally gave in to the tension that had been building between us. We stayed like that for what felt like an eternity, wrapped up in each other. The world outside forgotten, I could feel her body trembling slightly against mine, the soft sound of her breathing filling the air between us. Finally she pulled back slightly, her forehead resting against mine, her eyes half closed as she caught her breath. I could see the faintest hint of a smile on her lips, a kind of satisfaction that made my heart swell in my chest. "Are you okay?" she whispered, her voice barely audible but filled with a kind of tenderness that made me feel safe, cared for. I nodded, unable to form words. She smiled again, her fingers brushing lightly through my hair as she leaned in once more, her lips brushing softly against my cheek before pulling back completely. The room was filled with a warm, quiet calm, the tension that had once been there now replaced by a soft, glowing contentment. Neither of us spoke for a long time, just sitting there together, our breaths slowly returning to normal. The heat between us gradually cooling to something softer, more intimate. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and I wrapped my arm around her, pulling her closer as we sat in the fading light of the afternoon, the quiet sounds of the house surrounding us. Whatever this was between us, it was new, fragile, and completely unexpected, but in that moment, none of it mattered. All that mattered was that we were here together, sharing something that felt impossibly special. Something that went beyond anything either of us could have imagined, and for now that was enough. As we sat there, the quiet intimacy between us seemed to grow with each passing moment. The sunlight filtering through the window was beginning to fade, casting a soft amber glow over the room, but inside everything felt charged, alive. The weight of what had just happened hung in the air, and even though neither of us spoke, it was as though we were both waiting, suspended in this tension that had yet to fully unravel. I could feel her body relax slightly against mine, but the way she nestled closer, her hand gently resting on my thigh, made it clear that whatever had started between us wasn't over yet. My heart was still pounding in my chest, a strange mix of excitement and nervousness coursing through me. Every part of me was hyper-aware of her presence, her soft breaths, the warmth of her skin against mine, the subtle scent of her perfume still lingering in the air. She tilted her head slightly, her lips brushing against the side of my neck, sending shivers down my spine. The touch was light, barely there, but it ignited something inside me, a spark that flared into a slow burning desire. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the sensation wash over me before turning my head to look at her. Her eyes met mine, and there was something different in her gaze now, something darker, more intense. The softness from before was still there, but beneath it I could see a hunger that matched my own. She didn't say a word, but the way her fingers lightly traced circles on my leg told me everything I needed to know. I leaned in, capturing her lips again, but this time there was no hesitation, no tentative testing of boundaries. The kiss was deeper, more urgent, as if the need we had both been holding back had finally broken free. Her hand slid up my chest, her fingers curling into the fabric of my shirt as she pulled me closer, and I could feel her body responding to mine, the subtle press of her curves against me making my head spin. Everything about this moment felt forbidden, but that only seemed to make it more intoxicating. The fact that she was my stepmom, someone who had always been just out of reach, made the connection between us feel even more dangerous, and I couldn't stop myself from wanting more. Her hands moved to the back of my neck, pulling me down with her as she shifted on the bed, her body lying back against the pillows as she guided me. With her I followed the pull between us, too strong to resist, and soon I was hovering over her, my arms bracing me as I looked down at her, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her eyes locked on mine, and in that moment the intensity between us was palpable. She reached up, her fingers gently tracing the line of my jaw before tugging me down again, our lips meeting in another heated kiss. This time her hands roamed freely, exploring my back, my shoulders pulling me even closer until there was no space left between us. The heat from her body was overwhelming, and I could feel her heart racing just as fast as mine, the rhythm of it beating against my chest. I moved my hand down her side, feeling the soft curve of her waist beneath my fingers, and when I reached the hem of her shirt I hesitated for just a second, unsure if I was crossing a line, but she didn't pull away. If anything, she arched her back slightly, encouraging the touch her body, responding to mine in a way that left no doubt about what she wanted. My fingers slipped beneath the fabric, and as I slid my hand up along the smooth warmth of her skin, I heard her soft gasp, a sound that sent a fresh wave of heat coursing through me. Her hands tangled in my hair, pulling me closer as she deepened the kiss, her lips parting slightly to let me in. The taste of her was intoxicating, and I could feel the tension in her body, the way she moved beneath me, her every touch filled with a kind of urgency that made it impossible to think of anything else but her. We were completely lost in each other now, every barrier between us crumbling as we gave into the desire that had been simmering beneath the surface for so long. There was no going back. The weight of that realization hung in the air, but neither of us seemed to care. All that mattered was this moment, this connection, this undeniable pull that had drawn us together. Her hands were everywhere, tracing the lines of my shoulders, my arms, my chest, as if she couldn't get enough, and I felt the same. The more I touched her, the more I wanted her, and the intensity of it all was almost overwhelming. It was as if we had been holding back for so long, and now that the floodgates were open, there was no stopping the tide that swept us both away. She moaned softly against my lips, her fingers tightening in my hair as she pressed her body against mine, and the sound of it sent a fresh surge of desire through me. I couldn't get enough of her. Her taste, her scent, the feel of her beneath me. Every part of me was on fire, and I knew that there was no going back. Now, not after this. I pulled back for just a moment, my eyes searching hers as if I needed to make sure she was still with me in this, still wanting it as much as I did. But the look in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. There was no hesitation there, no second thoughts, only that same smoldering hunger that had been there from the beginning, urging us forward. Without a word, she reached for me again, her fingers curling into the front of my shirt, pulling me down to her with a soft, almost pleading urgency. And as our lips met once more, I felt myself completely surrendered to the moment, letting go of every doubt, every fear, and giving in to the desire that had been building between us since the moment I walked into that room. The tension between us was electric, every touch, every kiss pushing us closer to the edge. Her body moved beneath mine, her hands roaming over my skin as if she couldn't get enough, and the sound of her breathless gasps filled the room, driving me wild with need. We were tangled in each other now, completely consumed by the passion that had taken hold of us, and there was no turning back. I felt her fingers trail down my chest, her touch sending shivers through me as she pulled me closer still, her body arching beneath mine as if begging for more, and I gave it to her, every touch, every kiss, every whispered word, drawing us deeper into the moment until there was nothing left but the two of us, lost in a world of our own making. The intensity of it all was almost too much to bear, the tension between us building to a fever pitch as we teetered on the edge of something deeper, something more, but we weren't ready to let go just yet. We lingered there, hovering on the brink, savoring every touch, every kiss, as the heat between us grew and grew until it felt like we might both explode from the sheer intensity of it. I could feel her trembling beneath me, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps as she clung to me, her body pressing against mine in a way that made my head spin, and I knew that she felt it too. That same unbearable tension, that same desperate need for Release, but we weren't there yet, not quite. We hovered on the edge, drawing out the moment, letting the anticipation build until it was almost too much to bear. The room was filled with the sounds of our breathless moans, our whispered names, the quiet urgency of our movements, as we gave into the passion that had been simmering between us for so long. It was perfect, this moment, this connection between us, and as I held her close, our bodies moving together in perfect harmony, I knew that nothing would ever be the same after this. We had crossed a line, stepped into something forbidden, something dangerous, but I didn't care. Not anymore, because in that moment, as we hovered on the edge of something more, all that mattered was her touch, her kiss, the feel of her beneath me, as we lost ourselves in each other completely. And as we finally let go, surrendering to the intensity of it all, I knew that this was only the beginning. I